The following presentation is brought to you through the power of science.
Ooh, shiny.
Welcome to Generations Geek, a more or less family-friendly celebration of all that is geeky. I'm science fiction writer Scott Pearson, and along with my daughter Ella,
Hello.
we are two generations of geek.
This is episode 44, Special Order 937, the second in our epic multi-part special Grupp edition reviews of the entire Alien film series. This time, we dive into the classic first film, Alien.
But first, remember you can find us online at generationsgeek.com, which includes handy links to all our episodes.
Now, on with the show.
Right, we've just watched Alien. For me, the millionth time over the decades. For you, it's what?
It's 3? I think
three,
it's
maybe
3.
four.
Maybe 4.
And I want to emphasize that this is the first film. There are no films that exist before this.
If you say that, then we don't have Walter.
Nothing happened before.
That's so rude.
Oh, okay. We can't get sidetracked onto the prequels. Now we're at what started it all, so we'll start at the top. So as everyone knows, that they get awakened from sleep to go investigate a mysterious signal.
I was really, those first few scenes, I was having like PTSD from that Alien video game that I was playing.
Yes.
And I didn't get that far into it because it's so unbelievably scary to me. But the shot of the towers, and because the last thing I was doing in the game was like going in between the towers. And it was so scary because you have to go into like these little like trams or whatever. And it was just, and then it takes a long time for the doors to open. And oh my God, it's just so creepy.
It's such an atmospheric film. It starts out, everyone's still asleep, and there's just these long shots through the ship, and it just establishes this very real world. To me, one of the reasons why the film is so successful at being so scary is because of how real it seems. You know, the ship is dirty, there's little personal items tucked everywhere. It just puts you in this environment that, although it's, you know, futuristic and all that sort of stuff, it just seems so real and lived in.
That hits me every time, too, because especially the way the actors interact with each other and the way, I don't know, the way they speak is so natural and comfortable and like they are a crew, which is like so, like any show, any movie, that's like the most important thing is that the actors have chemistry together, no matter what kind of chemistry that is. And it's off the charts.
They're everyday Joes.
Yeah.
You know, they're not superheroes. You know, not just that they're not superheroes as like literally, like with superpowers, but they're not heroes like Captain Kirk or something.
Well,
you know,
they're
they're just ordinary working folk.
They're like, they're like blue collar workers of the future.
And so when they get thrust into this horrible situation and they're just trying to deal with it the best they can, they're so much more relatable, and it just makes it so much more scary than if you have a sense that these are people that deal with this all the time and they're going to pull something off. It's like you don't have that feeling because they don't know what the heck's going on. I
think part of it is the sound, too. And I don't mean like the soundtrack, I mean like the way you hear the dialogue. And I don't know if this is because they were improvising or not, but sometimes they say things and they're across the room and it's quieter, or like, and that seems more real to me. Or they say something and they're off screen. Yeah.
Or they start saying
something seem much more real.
They start saying something that never gets finished.
Yeah.
You know, and so it all of that just ties into the naturalness and the reality. I thought you were going in a different direction when you first brought up sound, because I think there's some great uses of sound in here.
Oh, there's definitely good uses of sound that isn't soundtrack and that isn't dialogue.
There's creepy sounds.
The creaking, just the sound of the ship moving through space. Yeah, it's good.
There's a sound that's in a lot of scenes. You kind of think of it as sort of the background thrumming of the machinery of the ship, but it also has kind of a heartbeat sound to it.
Yeah, you have like the bass soundscape that makes you it
Oh.
feels like you're on a big machine, like a starship. It's like when you if you go on YouTube and you search, like, you can listen to like the sound of the like
The Enterprise, or
the Enterprise, like warp engines, or like
Yeah.
the TARDIS, and it's just that the base stuff that's behind everything else
Yeah.
all the time, and it's just so cool.
Okay, so they wake up. It's a great scene, almost like Birth, where they're coming
I really
up
like
out
that
of
scene,
out of
and also
sleep.
it takes so long,
Mhm.
or I mean, they make you think it takes so long for them to sort of wake up and
Yeah,
be
they don't just snap
conscious
out
and-
of it.
Yeah.
It's a process.
Something I noticed in that scene and then immediately remembered there's a reason for it later, is that Ash is in there with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that right away, and I was like, that's kind of weird. But I forgot
That they don't know.
I forgot that they don't know that he's a robot, so why would he be awake the whole time?
So after they wake up, then you get that great first scene of them eating together that establishes that very natural, real tone before they find out that Mother, the computer, has awakened them early, which obviously then sets up when we finally get to the planet. I love the whole sequence where they get into orbit, disconnecting from the refinery and going down and landing. I love it. It's great classic practical effects with a big model.
Yeah.
You know,
It's good.
it's so good. And you know, there are elements of it now that obviously appear dated from an effects standpoint, but
I think it holds up really well.
It really does hold up, and it's still just so, it just draws you in. It's so engaging.
Also, there's a moment when they actually land and then stuff kind of explodes where Ash has like this reaction. And when I saw it, I was like, that's a weird reaction for an android to have. But then I was thinking, like, maybe it's Ash pretending to be a person. Because he has this weird he sort of like jumps and then he like looks around very strangely.
Everything still seems pretty normal. They head out to go find the source of the signal.
Get creepy.
Yeah, it's very, well, one thing I noticed this time, because this was something I was talking about in the previous episode about the prequels, that I was confused about whether or not in the world of these films, if they had actually encountered extraterrestrials before or not. Because I found in the prequels that the references to that were very unclear, and I couldn't get I just like couldn't figure it out. Now I noticed
they don't really address it.
Yeah, and it's all very strange because it's like, if you're seeing something extraterrestrial for the first time, you'd think you'd be going, whoa, what is that? And there doesn't seem to be a reaction like that. But then they also don't seem to have a reaction like, wow, this isn't like those creatures we saw on planet Zerbermeister or something. You know?
I kind of like
so
it, though,
it's kind
because
of weird.
It's almost like if they haven't met aliens before, they're like, obviously there's aliens.
Yeah, and it could be that.
And
but
then if they have met aliens, they just are like, here's some more aliens.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of bugged me in the prequels, but I had kind of forgotten now watching Alien again when they're first discussing the mysterious signal they've gotten that Ripley says, human? She asks, is it, you know?
And they're like, oh.
And they're like, well, we don't really know yet. And so that does seem to be a casual acknowledgement that there has been at least some interaction with extraterrestrials, because and not just animals you find on some planet, but intelligent extraterrestrials that would have signals.
Well,
because no one, when she says human, no one reacts like, what do you mean? You think we're going to meet some crazy Martians or something? You know, everyone just like says, So there clearly has been some sort of human extraterrestrial interaction in the universe, but we don't get any details about it. On a related note, then when they do get to the crashed ship, you know, no one makes a particularly big deal out of the fact that they're seeing what is obviously an extraterrestrial ship. And when Dallas refers to the remains of the pilot in there as being, He calls it an alien life form, and once again, in a very matter-of-fact way.
But just kidding, it's a spacesuit, guys.
It is not a spacesuit.
Just kidding, it's a spacesuit.
He clearly refers to it as bones. He thinks they're
Spacesuit.
fossilized.
He thinks they're bones.
And do you really believe that someone would look
thinks-
at a spacesuit and mistake it for? It's just we're not even gonna. We're not going back down that road.
We're gonna go back down that.
It's bones, and that's all it is. So, so then obviously things are getting creepy because they're on the spaceship. It's a creepy spaceship. Kane goes down there, and then things really start running off the rails.
Oh my god. Okay.
Because suddenly he's getting hugged, and not in a good way.
It bugs me
All
so
up in
much.
that
He goes
face.
down there and he's like, it's so weird. This light reacts when I touch it. Like he shouldn't immediately bounce if he touches something and it reacts. Like,
He's very curious.
and then he slips and still is just like, I guess I'm down here now. Better look at this thing.
Yeah, it's funny because Ash is the science guy, but
he
Kane
stays on the ship.
is clearly
He's the one
very
poking around.
curious and wanting to get into things. You know, something that I never
It's
thought
like those
about.
nerds from Prometheus, right? Who are like, oh, it's beautiful.
There is no Prometheus. There is only Alien. I've always previously considered that the egg chamber is a huge subterranean cavern tunneled out by the xenomorphs. But this time I was wondering, could that just be like the lower deck of the ship? Because it's a pretty big ship.
It has to be big because those aliens are huge.
Yeah. So Kane somewhat unwisely looks over the mysterious egg-shaped object that has opened up in front of him. And then
To be fair, though,
he gets in trouble.
would you expect something of that size to punch entirely through a freaking spacesuit?
Yeah, I mean, it comes out of nowhere.
We can make fun of him, but like kind of fair though. It's like if you were wearing like chainmail and a shark a shark the size of your arm came at you and just punched through it, you'd be like, what the like
Yeah, so this leads us into when things start getting really horrifying, obviously, because now he's got the Facehugger. They bring him back.
those shots of Kane just lying flat on his back are so like just laser etched into my brain forever since the first time I watched Alien.
Let's hop back a little bit because I want to talk about the great scene where Ripley, being the smart one, tries to maintain quarantine procedures.
Oh my god, Ripley is everything you want anybody to be in a horror movie. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm the commanding officer and you know the rules. And she says, she's so calm. She says, listen to me. We could all die if you bring that thing on board.
You know,
and then guess what? They all die.
Maybe this is a good point to insert this little note. Sigourney Weaver's astonishing, commanding performance in this film.
Sigourney Weaver is a queen, honestly.
She is, but you know, this was practically her first film. She was a nobody.
Oh, really?
And she was
Dang.
she was unknown.
I want to be her so
And
bad.
the cast around her,
Those curly bangs.
the cast around her, most of whom were established actors, even well known to a certain extent. Veronica Cartwright, that played Lambert, she'd been in the business for years.
Wow.
She was like a child actor.
Wow.
She was in The Birds, actually.
Oh.
As a little girl. I mean, so Dallas, the captain, he had been in the film version of MASH.
Aw, which I haven't seen.
Very solid people around her, and man, she's just taking care of business. I mean, what a breakout role.
I think about her in this movie kind of a lot because that's like my goal cosplay. That would be like peak cosplay for me.
Have you seen
Be ringlet, curly bangs, the whole 9 yards.
Have you seen the new 1/6 scale alien Ripley figure that's coming out?
I haven't.
Oh my gosh, people. Ripley, in those clothes, she's got the flamethrower, she's got the little pet carrier with Jonesy in it. She's got a couple different hands, so you can have her grabbing different things. It's the first time a figure has been actually approved by Sigourney Weaver. She approved the likeness, because there's an earlier 1/6 scale that you could get with a loader from Aliens. It was in the,
Lit.
but it, cost hundreds of dollars when it came out.
That's me on my way to class.
And now it's worth thousands of dollars as a collectible because it was limited. But anyway, back to the film. You were mentioning that Kane lying there with the facehugger freaks you out.
It's so weird, and it's less when the first and second times I saw that scene, it was a lot more unsettling, and I felt a lot more, I guess, fear, but like subtle fear.
Mm-hmm.
The more I watch it, it's just so, I don't know, memorable.
Mm-hmm. Should we just get straight to the Chestburster?
I think we should.
Should we talk about the
no,
Chestburster?
we have to
now?
talk about.
Is there something you want to talk about before
yes,
we
we
get
have to talk about the scene where they go in to look for it. They go in to look for the facehugger. And they leave the door open?
For quite a while before Ash finally goes and shuts it. Yeah, that was a little nerve-wracking. Wanted to say, guys.
It's the beginning of Ash being a number one creep, except for when he lets them actually inside the ship. Also, side note, something else ridiculous. When Ripley is like, Ash, I'm the commanding officer when, Dallas and whoever are both gone. And he's just like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, you're a robot. We know you didn't forget. Second of all, if you're a human, unacceptable excuse much? Can you imagine, like, you're in the military and you're given an order and you, like, ignore it? It's like, I'm your commanding officer. It's like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
You know, like, and Ripley kind of, I mean, she knows that she's suspicious of him, but she doesn't really, like.
She lets it go onto the.
She doesn't throw him in the brig, like.
Yeah.
The other thing about the scene where they're looking for the facehugger, immediately after, they just, like, walk Kane out of there. Nobody's like, maybe we should give him another x-ray first. They're just like, oh, he's awake. That must mean he's fine. Let's all have community dinner before we get back in our sleep pods.
Yeah. Well, but I think part of that is because they were trusting Ash to make some sort of assessment along those lines. We forgot entirely to speak about the first acid blood scene.
That's good. It's a good one.
Which is so. And see, the thing is, down people forget. I mean, after all these years and all the various sequels and the prequels, all this stuff has become so iconic that it's easy to forget how much this movie blew people's minds when it came out in 1979.
Some of us weren't alive in 1979.
Because, yeah, and huge films in the past that become a part of general pop culture, then young people like yourself have often encountered references to films for years before you actually see the film. Mm-hmm. And so it takes away some of that shock value. That's why I find myself always kind of rushing toward the Chestburster scene when we're discussing something like this, because that scene was so amazing because I saw this film in the theater in 1979, and in the crowded theater I saw it in, after the Chestburster, complete silence. Everyone was just stunned. It was so quiet. I just remember, after all these decades, I can still just remember the shock of that scene. And I think part of it is, so it's 1979. Now, obviously, in the science fiction genre, there has been a long history of monsters from outer space.
Yeah.
If you go back to the 50s, you have like a classic movie like The Thing from Another World from 1951, has a space monster. You have the Blob. So there's a history of the monster from space. But when we're in 1979, if you look over like the few years before that, in 1977 we had Close Encounters of the Third Kind and we had Star Wars. And those are two very different films, but what's similar between them is that although they had scary moments and there were bad guys in Star Wars, mostly aliens were just like kind of cool and fun and cute and funny. They were weird shapes and and so there was this tone. I mean, there was a scary sort of horror sci-fi movie in 1978, the remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But although in a sense people kind of become monsters in those films, it's like it's a person and they're just changed in a way or whatever. It's not the same as an actual physical monster thing. And so I think that was part of why people were not expecting such a crazy, scary monster in space kind of thing. The film actually has more in common with a different kind of film that was popular in the 70s. The slasher film, where you have some sort of horrible bad guy that's killing people one by one and never seems to quite die when the people try to do something to kill him.
They're called slasher films because this was before the hash-slinging slasher.
Yeah. In the 70s, yeah, I mean, there's the your psycho killer kind of film, and for a while they became known as slasher films back in this time because you had movies like, I'm thinking of the classic movie Halloween that came out in 1978, and you had Michael, the shape in the mask with a big knife, or you had the Friday the 13th films, which, Jason used a variety of implements to kill people one by one, and they became known as...
It's Saturday the 14th right now. Fun fact as we're recording.
And so in many ways, the alien fills the role. It's a monster, it's a psycho killer, or but it's also just kind of an animal. It's like Jaws or something. It's not really a moral thing. It's just being an animal, doing what animals do.
The Jaws shark is malicious. It knows.
Well, it's not necessarily behaving the way a real shark does, but it's still...
That shark is sentient.
But it's still just an animal doing what an animal does. So, the Chestburster. What a scene. And then from there, it definitely
Ash says, "Don't touch it!"
It becomes a much more traditional monster movie at that point, because then you actually have a big, scary monster, where before
first it's a
it was
little
more
scary
creepy.
monster.
Yeah. One thing I noticed this time was that there are a couple of shots where I think you can see the camera dolly track.
Oh, yeah.
Just in the shot, and they didn't really have to bother with it because
it looks...
the ship is so cluttered and it
doesn't
stuff.
Matter.
It's like it just kind of...
They could borderline have a boom mic in there and it wouldn't matter.
Yeah. So yeah, there was one shot when Dallas is in the vents and the camera's, dollying back from him.
They just didn't bother.
And there's the tracks. And then there's another shot down one of the corridors in the ship. And it looks like there's just dolly tracks right there. But again, it just blends right in with the general messy aesthetic of the ship.
That part where he jumps down and then he shines the flashlight on the alien gets me
right
so
there.
Bad every
my
time.
Gosh.
And every time I'm like, it's gonna be there. And then it's there, and every time I jump like a foot out of my seat and throw my arms in the air like I have to run from it.
Let's back up a little bit, because before he goes into the air vents we lose Brett going off looking for Jonesy. Should we talk about that a little bit?
I like when he goes, "Here, kitty," and then he's like, "Ugh," and he's just like, "Jones."
Yeah. There's many things I love about this scene. On the one hand, it is kind of the cliche scene in a monster movie or a slasher flick where you should never go off alone because you know you're going to be picked off. But he goes off to
they're looking for this thing, and they're like, "You go find it, and we're gonna keep. Go find the cat, and we'll keep going." It's like,
yeah. So he goes.
I don't know about that.
But then I like, oh my gosh, the detail of the sets is just crazy, because that's one of the scenes where he wanders off and he's in the different rooms and you're seeing these strange little vehicles, like,
and there's chains like clinking together.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like it's like in Covenant in the
what is Covenant? There is no
boy. It's like in Covenant when Daniels has it in the with all the like terrain vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got all the chains, connection, continuity,
uncreative repetition.
Whoa!
So I love that you get see these little vehicles, because it just implies this larger reality of it's just goes back to what I was saying at the top, that it's just like it was so real. You're just in this universe that's so real. Yeah. In the room with the chains and the raining and stuff, that big structure hanging down was the landing gear.
Oh, what? Where's the rain coming from?
Just watching it this time, I thought of the rain as just condensation inside this thing because it had been open to the exterior. But I don't know. It is strange and unexplained that there's all this water.
I always, when we're talking about Alien, I think I go to Ridley Scott, and I'm like, no, that's the guy who did The Martian. Like, they can't be the same person.
But they are.
The Martian is so different. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, he's done a wide variety of films. Oh, but then I always want to give a shout out to the best cat reaction shot in the history of cinema.
That cat deserves an Oscar.
Yeah. Because when the xenomorph pulls Brett up, and there's the shot of the cat just looking up. I love that.
It's so good.
Things are getting brutal. Dallas goes into the air ducts. He gets taken, as you've already previously alluded to.
Yoink. What if the alien made sounds like Scooby-Doo sound effects when it took people?
Let's talk about Ash when he freaked out. It's such a great scene because, once again, there was no way to expect an android. That just came out of nowhere. That was just like a complete... You were just as surprised as the characters in the film that, oh my gosh, he's a robot. And so at first, you're just thinking the guy's losing it. He's snapping or whatever. But then you're kind of wondering, like, why is he sweating milk? You can see this, like, white, and it's just like, what's up with this guy? What's going on? And
I really like when something breaks and he's spinning around on that wall.
Oh, it's so disturbing.
How did he do that?
That scene
I think
is so
part of it
disturbing.
is maybe them... I think they have to have sped it up. Maybe?
Yeah,
But it looks so real and bizarre.
Yeah, because you're still not at that point, until he actually gets his head knocked off, you're still wondering...
Well, even as a robot, you know what I mean? Like, it's so like, oh my god.
But when you're still thinking, well, that he's a person, and to have him spinning around and he's spewing stuff out of his mouth, it doesn't seem like he's throwing up like a person does. There's just stuff,
doing, buddy?
And and talking nonsensically, and wow, it was so disturbing. And it still is, but again, going back to that first viewing in a theater in 1979, it was just so creepy. Man, Lambert very quickly loses it.
Yeah.
And if she had been the only female character in the film, it would have been annoying. But she wasn't.
She's upset and she's crying, but she's still pretty much doing her job.
She still tries to do her job.
Like, she tries to convince them to do something else, and then they're like, we're not doing that, and then she still is, you know, like on the phone to Dallas, and she has the motion detector anyways, like she's trying.
Well, and completely losing it under the circumstances is a believable and natural reaction.
Yeah, I think I would be her.
And so, but that was one thing I appreciate about the film, is that you've got Ripley, who's very strong, and yet you see her, you still see the strain, you know, you see her breaking down a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, the performance has great range to it. Oh man, it's just so good. Well, and I was commenting to you before we started watching it that I was so excited to watch it. And I mean, I have no recollection of how many times I have watched this film.
A lot.
Over the decades. I mean...
Because it's been...
Well, this was one of the first films I owned.
Years?
I bought Alien on VHS back in the 80s. And then at some point I bought the DVD, and then at some point I bought the DVD again when they came out with a special edition with 2 discs. and so I have owned this thing in multiple formats over the decades. I've watched it over and over and over and over and over. But then when we plan to sit down to watch it, I'm just like, ooh, I can't wait.
The only Alien DVD I own is Covenant.
Oh, there is you're some sort of hallucination that there's a movie called Covenant that has something to do with Alien. I don't know why. I don't know what. Oh man, where are we? Getting very close to the end of this fabulous film.
I was trying to, because we are doing a multi-part series, I was trying to connect the prequels to this movie.
Okay. Should we talk about that a little bit right now?
Let's talk about it. I have one example.
Okay.
And it's literally just the spaceships. Mm-hmm. The Nostromo versus the Covenant, which is that they have long shots of spaceship interior. In Covenant, that's more people are walking somewhere, and it has a nice panning shot of the interior of the spaceship. In the beginning of Alien, it's empty while they're still sleeping. That's pretty much all I got. I wanted to talk about Walter more in this podcast. Obviously, there's nothing. If my life was a sitcom and there was some shenanigans going on that I didn't know about, and I was like mad about it, they would be like, Ella, you were probably in your room thinking about Walter. And I would be like, I don't do that. And then it would cut to me holding a picture of Walter and crying, just going, you are my sunshine.
So you want, okay, so you mentioned tracking shots as something that sort of connected the style of the direction of the films. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah.
And one thing that
the style of the spaceship, sort of, even though obviously it seems more advanced, and well, I guess it's the Star Trek Discovery versus the original series.
Well, I think though in the Alien continuity, I get the sense that the Nostromo is an old ship.
Yeah, but the Discovery is an old ship.
It's an old. Well, but I don't want to talk about Discovery. Let's not.
That's a different podcast.
Let's not get that all muddled in here.
Do you know do you see the comparison I'm making?
Yes,
though? It's the exact same thing.
A timeline issue when you do
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it is.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just trying to stay focused on Alien. So
how can we?
To me, the spaceship in Covenant, I get the impression that it is, even though it's earlier, it's a nice spankin' new ship, whereas the Nostromo is
You're right. I think you're right about that, though, because they would send a spankin' new ship to start the colony.
Yeah, whereas the Nostromo, who knows when that thing was made?
Because what do they do?
You know, and
mine. What?
Because the Nostromo is the tug that pulls that like space refinery around, and who knows when that tug was built, how long it's been used. I mean, Dallas refers to going out on like 5 previous missions with someone else, And, how long are those missions? I mean, they go into their little sleep pods.
Yo, though, like, is anyone a little worried about what happened to the previous science officer? 2 days before they ship out, he's replaced with Ash?
Well, but they probably just, made it happen without whacking them or something. The company just
I don't
said,
know about that, Rick.
The company just said, you've been reassigned. Boom. So anyway, I think there are other elements of technology portrayed in the prequels that are more problematic, but the comparison of the spaceships doesn't bother me in that sense. Well, and in a larger sense, I don't really let some of those fastidious points bother me because, you want your movie to look futuristic, and something that looked futuristic in 1979, the computer graphics on the Nostromo looked futuristic in 1979. If they had computer graphics like that in Covenant,
everyone would have been like,
it would have been ridiculous. So it's like,
good?
When you that's the problem of doing a prequel. You have to throw out continuity of design to maintain futuristic.
Did you notice similarities?
Between the films?
Yeah, other than the plot.
Other than the complete rehash of the,
other than the alien spacesuit / exoskeleton, other than cool spaceship, there's heroine with brown curly hair. Robot that goes crazy.
There are a bunch of elements that get reused, and to me, they just didn't. If you start extending a movie series or a book series, whatever, when you have a series, when you go to make another one, you ask yourself, what makes, an alien film an alien film? What are the iconic beats, the notes that you have to hit so that people feel like, yes, I've seen an alien film? And at some point, you start making decisions like, well, there has to be a crazy robot, there has to be a plucky heroine.
Oh, she's not plucky.
Yeah, but I'm just,
Who? I don't even remember Prometheus. We don't need to.
The danger is that on the one hand, yes, those elements give you that feeling, but on the other hand, they can start feeling like you're just retreading.
Where you're recycling.
Yeah, you're just
Star Trek Into Darkness.
And don't even go.
Let's keep making Star Trek comparisons.
And
I just have to apologize to Benedict Cumberbatch for that comment. It's not your fault. I love you. Leave him alone.
There was an effort made in story elements, some design stuff, some directorial elements to create an atmosphere of continuity between the films. But to me, the more important stuff of continuity, like a sensible plot line that leads from one into the next, for me, that wasn't there. And we talked about this when we talked about the prequels. We talked about how they related to Alien. And one of the things that I was talking about is that when you watch Alien, you don't come away from that film saying, I wonder where those aliens came from. I need that explained to me. It's like you're given such a perfect world in front of you in the Alien film that you just accept, here's an alien spaceship. Where did it come from? Well, it came from, whatever the alien was up to. And it got infested with these bugs.
I think you're right.
If you watch a movie from the Age of Sail and a ship is infested by rats, you don't say to yourself, I need a prequel to explain where the rats came from. You just get it. You get it in the world that you're in.
Here's a question, though.
Yeah.
If the prequels were made in a coherent and sensible way, and you came away loving them, and they felt like a real alien movie that added to the franchise, don't you think you would have been like, oh my god, I'm so glad I know where the aliens came from?
Although, upon seeing the original film, going back was unnecessary. That is not to say that someone couldn't have come up with a script that could have made me say, wow, I'm glad they did that. But
yeah,
but the
like
scripts they came up with
I feel like the problem in the
did not.
prequels was more in the way that it was executed and less about there not being a need for that part of the story, is what I'm saying. Because I don't know, I'm a fan of prequels. We've established that I love world building. Prequels are made exclusively for that purpose, pretty much.
Well, see,
so
the thing is, what gets in the way of some of these things is commercial value. Because what I come away from the original film wondering more about is the shady company. What's up with them?
You know what? You are completely right about that. The
And
company is what piques your interest in Alien, for sure.
Yeah, and they kind of touched upon that in Covenant, but, they focused more on the alien. And, of course, part of the problem is that, well, the original film was called Alien, and then the sequel was called Aliens. So it'd be kind of hard to go and do a movie in that world and not in some way bring in those xenomorphs. But I would have been more interested in the story that didn't have the xenomorphs. That was a different genre of film that was more about the company, that was more mysterious, that was more political.
It is really compelling when you have several movies to a franchise and they're different genres completely. That would have been
But can you imagine
really interesting.
Can you imagine making an alien movie without a xenomorph in it? It's like you couldn't get away with that. People would freak out. Or, maybe they
would definitely get some heat for it, but I think what you said about just having like a weird movie about the company, I think if they had the right script, it could work. I mean, if you have the right script, technically anything works.
And and you would it would all be in the marketing. You would be making it clear that this is a movie in this universe, but it's different. It's a different take.
Marketing in 2017. The Pacific. Let's talk about this. The Pacific Rim marketing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
You can sign up to be like a Jaeger cadet, and then they send you like texts like, we need your help, and they give you like assignments to do, and I have it, and I get texts like Jaeger cadets, and I think
that's clever.
It's fun. And something more relevant, the marketing for Covenant, where you could take the quiz and they would assign you what type of android you needed.
Well, yeah, those little short film kind of things that they put.
Yeah,
that was some great stuff.
Or where they're introducing David, you know what I mean? And it was like a commercial for the android from the company. It was great.
That was great stuff. And if the film had been more along those lines than just turning into a retread of the xenomorphs and weird retconning and
I like Covenant. I'm gonna say it. There are parts of it that are irritating, but you can watch it and you don't think about it.
Oh, yeah. There are some scenes here and there that I really
I liked Prometheus.
People who listen to our previous podcast know how much I enjoy Daniels and Walter, because I said in the previous podcast that the only way that I would want another Alien prequel is that if we see Walter rescue Daniels and it's about Walter and Daniel. It's like I don't even care about the alien anymore. It's just like, because we already know what happens with the aliens. But Walter and Daniels, those were some nice characters.
Those characters, Tennessee is solid. He doesn't get that much time in the movie. He gets more time in the book. But then
they get lost amongst a plot that largely is a retread of Alien.
In Covenant, you can ignore the problems, and in Prometheus, you're just confused the whole time.
Yeah, Covenant is in some ways better than Prometheus, I guess. I don't know. It's a hard call.
Anyways,
if we're doing a retrospective of the entire series, we're going to have to compare and contrast now and then between them.
Ripley running through the ship to the shuttle with a flamethrower in one hand and Jonesy in the other is my aesthetic.
Fabulous.
There's nothing that's more me.
It's such a satisfying film. One thing that I noticed this time that I thought was really cool, that just gave you this sense of scale, is when she launches the shuttle and there's the countdown going on and you just keep seeing It's like she still hasn't cleared the refinery yet.
Yeah.
And it just goes on, and you're starting to wonder, is she even going to clear the ship before the thing blows up? I thought that was such a nice touch, because it
cool.
really
You're like,
gave me the sense of the immensity
big
of that thing.
Yeah.
As we get now to the very end of the film, the other thing that ties into my comment about comparing it to a slasher film is that there's always one last zinger with the bad guy after you think he's dead.
Ka-chow!
And this one, you think she's escaped, and it turns out that he's on the ship with her. So then
we haven't gone to the 1970s yet in my cinema class,
then you
so
get the
I don't
final...
know anything about the film grammar of the time.
Okay, so was there anything else in the theatrical edition that you wanted to comment on?
I think it's cool that you're forced to figure out yourself that the alien is coming to the end of its life cycle. In that last scene, like, it's moving slowly and you're scared, but you don't really know what's going on. It's kind of still trying to, be a jerk.
Jonesy. Yeah, because there was a slightly different conception of the alien's life cycle in Alien than what they went with in Aliens. Because the reason why I asked if there's anything you wanted to talk about the theatrical version is because I did want to talk about that one of the deleted scenes, but we've been watching the theatrical versions of these films. That's what will continue throughout the series, although I think we will here and there have to talk about some of the deleted scenes.
Update, I have seen all the deleted scenes from Covenant. And let me tell you, it's like a solid Walter. It's good, you guys, Google them.
So the most amazing deleted scene from Alien is the cocooned scene where Ripley comes across Dallas and Brett cocooned by the alien. And in Aliens, that is turned into that the aliens cocoon them so that they're captive for the facehuggers to come along.
Yeah, Aliens is different.
But what seemed to be the idea is that those bodies just became the raw material out of which they grew more eggs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of implied by the condition of Dallas and Brett in that scene, because Brett looks kind of like melty and weird because he's been there longer, and Dallas looks more
he's conscious. He knows Ripley is there.
But he also seems like he knows
he's gone,
because he just says kill me. Mm-hmm. Where in Aliens, when you come across someone who's cocooned and once they wake up, it's like they're just their normal selves and they're like, whoa, get me out of here. They're trying to escape because
and there's also the queen
they're just trapped
in Aliens.
Yeah. And in Alien, there wasn't really that concept yet because I think it was Lambert that says, well, where's the rest of the crew? Well, I think you could infer, well, the organic material of the rest of the crew was used to create all those eggs down in the egg chamber.
Yeah, you're right.
And then, as you referred to, the xenomorph that's in the lifeboat, the shuttle or whatever at the end, he's so slow because he's dying. He's already served his purpose. He's cocooned some stuff to create the next cycle, and now he's just going to drop dead. The way a lot of insects have relatively short lives. They do whatever their little thing that they're supposed to do, and then they're done. Mm-hmm. Although that is a very interesting and creepy life cycle, I also think that going more full-on insect queen thing worked perfectly well in Aliens. Oh, yeah,
definitely. But we can talk about that next time.
Yes. So did you have any final thoughts?
I'm gonna be honest. Obviously, I love the Alien franchise. Mm-hmm. I'm new to it as of last year. But I think Aliens is my favorite. So I'm really excited to watch Aliens again. I've definitely only seen Aliens once.
Oh.
So I'm really excited to watch it again and talk about it.
But yeah, I love Alien. It's a great mashup of sci-fi and horror genres. And then, obviously, in Aliens, we get a mashup of sci-fi and adventure and military sci-fi.
Yeah.
It was a great idea to go for that difference in tone for the sequel, so it didn't have as much of a retread feel, and going with the well, I'm going to stop because otherwise I'll just be talking about Aliens for the next 20 minutes, and that we will save until next time.
That's all the time we have for this episode. Tune in next time for episode 45. The A2s always were a bit twitchy. Part 3 of our multi-part Alien retrospective as we discuss the classic sequel, Aliens.
Remember that Generations Geek is a part of the Chronic Rift Network, which broadcasts from Jonesy's pet carrier. Please give their other fine podcasts a listen at chronicrift.com. Thanks for listening, and come back next time. No geeks were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Ooh, shiny.